Hello,
Hello.
welcome on our talk about phenomenon of burnout among volunteers. My name is Aleksandra Błaszczyk. I am a crisis coach, trainer, and a consultant.
My name is Paulina Ostachowska. I'm a psychologist, and we both work at Mental Health Helpline, where we provide psychological support to people.
We decided to meet and talk about the increasing number of burnout volunteers in our society. The reason is the military crisis in Ukraine and people in Poland engaging in providing help and support to survivors of the war in Ukraine. In our work, we observe that more and more people experience crisis when providing this kind of help, and we decided to elaborate on it and to give you an overview of this whole phenomenon so that you can deal with this kind of crisis better. Paulina, as far as I know, volunteers come to you for consultation to discuss their crisis that they experience. Could you tell us what problems do they report?
Mainly, these are people who come and talking about feeling fatigue and mental and physical overload. Physical burden is associated with many things, many tasks to perform, many responsibilities. For example, they have to arrange place to for people who need help where they can stay and be saved. Also, they have to organize and delivering a lot of articles, first needs articles, a lot of products, food, water. And this is a lot of things to do for the group of volunteers. So they talk about it, and when they talk about mental fatigue and mental overload, they very often talking about feeling guilty, feel guilty that they are they're safe. They live in a country where war never happened in this time, of course, and they feel that's why this happened to other people. So they have feel guilty for this topic, and what is more, they feel guilty also when they want to take day off, for example, or spend time in other place than volunteer, because they have thoughts about they shouldn't do this. They have a lot of things to do in volunteer, and they should be there, help people, do more, and this is very stressful for them, and they can't relax. They can't stop thinking about it, even if they have day off, be with, for example, friends or family. They talk that they thinking about this person, these people. So this is very overload for them. So yes, this is the in mostly that's problem with they come.
Yeah, so I understand the volunteers take a lot of responsibility from providing very basic articles to the survivors of the war, to provide them shelter and also some kind of emotional support after they experience some horrible things while fleeing their country.
And what I want to talk more is about volunteers from Ukraine, because these volunteers also have feeling guilty, but this is different kind of feel guilty, because this is survivor
sense of guilt. Yeah.
Yes, because they are here in Poland, they feel safe, and they don't fight in the Ukraine, so they feel that they should do everything what they can to help people here in Poland. Very often they have some member of family who stay in Ukraine and fight, so they feel very stressful about this, and they feel guilty that they are safe here.
Yeah, I understand. It must be a big burden for them. So what you're saying seems that when it comes to burnout, it happens also in this kind of activity, that it's not a classic professional occupation. It's not a job where anyone gets paid.
Yes.
It doesn't have this financial reward. At the same time, people do experience symptoms that are very typical for classic burnout. You mentioned about fatigue, about being stressed under basically chronic stress, which probably affects the way they function on a daily basis. What is very typical for this kind of burden is that those people, correct me if I'm wrong, they feel very tired. They have difficulty engaging more.
Yes.
They lack energy. Also, they might react inadequately on emotional level, on social level.
Yes.
Sometimes they could have some inadequate reactions, like, I don't know, outbursts of anger or tears, being very nervous, maybe not responding properly to the survivors, right?
Yes.
So this happens also in regular kind of work, and it shows that those people are already exhausted and lack mental energy that would support them and give them strength to continue this kind of activity.
Yes, most of them have never been before in volunteer, so they don't know how this works, what is happened, and how this look like. And in this situation is new for everyone, and also with them. So they have some idea about idealization about maybe volunteering, but now they are there and see how this look, but they very often tell that they want to help, still want to help, but they feel lack of energy, as you said, and feel like they don't have willingness to do this, don't be effective like before earlier. So yes, this is very stressful for them also.
Yeah, this is actually another set of symptoms when it comes to burnout. It's called lack of professional efficiency or personal efficiency, where people feel that they would like to do the job, but they feel helpless. They don't have enough strength and energy. They don't have this cognitive capability as they used to, because they're just overworked. They're exhausted, so their brain does not function properly.
Yes.
And this might result with this feeling or this drop of self-esteem, anger towards themselves, that they are not efficient enough, that they should do better. So this is where the sense of guilt comes into play, and I understand it must be very difficult for those people to experience.
Yes, they see that their behaviors is change. They don't be that effective like earlier at the beginning on volunteers, for example. They very often their family members say change behaviors in this person, because they see that there's something wrong with them. But volunteers don't have, I think, thinking about maybe they should do something with them, take off, for example, that this is normal situation, that they feel like that.
Right, we do take days off when we work, right? In our professional engagement. Why not taking a day off from volunteering? It's also work for our brain. There is no difference whether it's paid or not.
Yes.
All right. So let's maybe summarize the symptoms of burnout for our viewers. What should be alarming for you when you engage in volunteering work and at some point you feel that you cannot make it anymore? First of all, you might feel emotionally or physically drained, exhausted. You feel that you're lacking energy, not only for helping others, but also for other daily activities, like your regular work or engaging with your family or friends or whatever you do in your free time. You might feel overly irritated, agitated, not reacting properly, overreacting to things that normally would not put you out of balance. You might get cynical and sarcastic, especially towards people that you provide help to, because this is basically a defense mechanism that would help you defend yourself from difficult emotions and feelings in this situation. At the same time, it is a sign of burnout. And the last part of symptoms is related to your personal efficiency, your self-esteem, and feeling of helplessness, of hope, loss of hope. So these are the classical symptoms of burnout, and if you experience them, it's kind of a wake-up call that should make you think about the extent of your engagement. Paulina, we discussed symptoms of burnout, so now I think it's worthwhile to talk about the reasons why actually burnout happen. Could you tell us what volunteers complain mostly about?
So volunteers complain about things which comes from their beliefs about how volunteers should look like, because very often they think that they should do a lot of things and everything what they can in these volunteers. They give all of their free time to help these people, and they forget about themselves, forget about to relax, to take rest, think about themselves and do something for themselves. So this is one issue. The next is problem with assertive. Because volunteers very often also have problem with assertive and say that they can do something or want to take a break, and they have problem with set boundaries, and this is very stressful also. Very often these people who come to volunteers, this is a very specific type of people, because very often these people is very sensitive. They're sensitive for people's tragedy, and they go to volunteers for their needs of their heart, and they want to do everything what they can't do. So this type of people have higher risk to burnout.
Right.
So yes, this is it. And what I observe also in volunteers, and what about they talk, is that they compare to each other, to other volunteers.
Okay.
And this work in two ways, because in one hand they compare to volunteers who are very commitment, very do a lot of things, spend a lot of time in volunteering. So people, when compared with that kind of people, think about themselves that they not enough, don't do enough, and this also make that they feel frustrating. And the other hand, they compare to volunteers who are less have less willingness and less commitment, don't do a lot of things. Very often they leave early. So this also make these people frustrating and stressful, because they feel maybe this is unfair for them. Why these people do that? So yes, this is hard for volunteers.
Yeah, I understand.
And they talk about it.
So you were talking about those individual reasons of burnout that can take place, and I definitely can see the reflection of it when it comes to burnout in professional engagement. For example, you mentioned about those beliefs that are not very supporting when it comes to this maintaining the engagement. So first of all, you're saying that they have this certain vision about themselves while volunteering. I can imagine that they have certain image of themselves about how much can they give, how much can they, how much support and what kind of support can they provide. And very often, probably it happens that they go off limits with their engagement, so they get obviously exhausted and tired. And then you mentioned the lack of assertiveness. Very typical individual reason for burnout is that people cannot set boundaries, and they believe they should provide more and be better. Very often it's connected to perfectionism, especially when you mentioned that they tend to compare to other people. So they might again have this sense of guilt and being inadequate or not doing enough. Right.
And when it comes to volunteers coordinators who also come to us and talk about their difficulties, they say they have also great pressure and have a great number of responsibilities from these volunteers and also from people who live who come here in Poland and need help. So this is very stressful for coordinators, and they talk about this, and they also take on themselves a lot of things and activities, because when, for example, some volunteers don't come, then coordinators very often do this beside.
They take on their tasks.
Yes.
Right. So now you mentioned some organizational reasons for burnout. These are called environmental reasons, environmental root causes. And seems that one of them is work overload. That there is a lot of work all the time. There are less people coming. That's why coordinators have to get involved. And since there is no real structure, probably, I suspect, there is a certain mismatch between the tasks and competences of volunteers. But very often they don't feel competent to take up certain tasks. They're not prepared.
Yes.
They didn't have this experience before. And on top of that, they have to listen to all these tragic stories and somehow contain it and process it. So it's a really very tough work. And another thing might be feeling of injustice, because you said that some volunteers take up a lot of tasks, some just less, basically as much as they can, and for some people it might create a sense of injustice, that they put a lot of effort whereas others just show up occasionally. And since this is not a structured working environment, probably it's very hard to manage that.
Yes.
All right. Anything else that you can observe as potential reason of burnout?
They talk about what you said about organization problems. Of course, not all of volunteers organization have problems, but especially the young one, which create for this situation, don't have time to organize their structure in good way. And very often in this kind of organization, volunteers complain about inadequate matches task for their competence, for example, and yes, this is a big problem for them, and very often they have a lot of tasks in different specific tasks, so this is also a very overload for them if we think about organization problems.
I can also imagine that when they join their team to help, they just jump into work, and there is not much time and space to process all this, right? Probably when they have, at least that's what I heard, when they have team meetings, it's very operational. This just distribution of tasks or execution of tasks. But there is no room for emotional support and this kind of ventilation of all those difficult emotions, right? So probably this can be, in this kind of job, I suppose, this could be another reason.
Yes.
All right, so to summarize briefly, maybe let's give some tips to coordinators. Obviously, this job is very demanding. And requires a lot of extra engagement and being very mindful about other people's needs. What can definitely help is borrowing some good practices from business and organizing frequent meetings with volunteers that you manage. Discuss with them not only the tasks and results, but also how they feel about it. If this kind of tasks suit them, if this is not too much, if this is not overbearing for them. And also, what is very helpful, just give those people space to talk about what they've heard, what they've experienced, so that they could just, process this and get it out of their minds. This could be a practice that can be very helpful when it comes to soothing the burnout symptoms.
Yes, this is important to observe volunteers, how they behave, how they look, and ask how they feeling, that this everything is okay. This is very important because we can very quickly realize that something is wrong and help volunteers to not come to burnout.
Yeah, right.
Yes, so coordinators, this is good and helpful if then pay attention about these symptoms in volunteers.
Yeah. Paulina, you mentioned that volunteers that come to see you, they tell that in the beginning usually a lot of people is involved, they also feel big engagement, but then somehow it disappears. So there's a certain strange process behind. Can you observe anything like that in specific?
Yes, they talk about this, that at the beginning everyone go to volunteers in a great willingness, big commitment. They also talk about they have some certain vision about how these volunteers should look like or look like in their mind, and this is not like this really look, because they talk about at the beginning also they have a lot of energy to do this, and every volunteers have great sense of community in organization. They talk together, they help together, and there are a lot of people in volunteers, but by the time they observe that a lot of people leave for these volunteers, they observe lack of resource, lack of human resource, and lack of articles, first needs articles. So they observe also lack of energy, commitment. Also, they don't feel the same. They feel overloaded. They don't have willingness and don't have time to do all these things, because a lot of duties to do on the list.
So it seems that volunteers, after this first big engagement and enthusiasm, they experience certain disappointment.
Yes.
It's also very typical for regular burnout, where you can observe certain phases of burnout. It starts with a honeymoon. It's very similar to what you described, that they come with a lot of expectations, a lot of fantastic visions about how it's gonna be, who they're gonna meet there, how they're gonna operate, and they have a lot of hope probably for this vision to accomplish. But at some point they get into a clash with reality, right?
Yes.
Where they show up in an organization that work from bottom up. There is no certain structure. The resources have to be donated by private people. There are no structured donations. So there is a lot for them to take care of, and they probably struggle with some kind of injustice or disappointment that it's not as great as they imagined it would be.
Yes.
So the second stage is basically disappointment, right? When the reality does not match expectations. And here we have two ways out. Actually, one way is out, the other is not out. It's just, going down the road of burnout. So the way out is basically to realize what are the circumstances, what are the facts, what is actually possible in this situation, and accepting this reality. This is called managing expectations, and when you accept it, you can go on within given terms, right, and be more realistic about it. And this actually can stop the burnout vicious circle. But if you don't do it, if you keep struggling with reality, it might result with chronic stress, because you would want to accomplish this vision that was on your mind, but it's not possible. So you get overly stressed, the stress becomes chronic, and it leads to full-blown burnout with all the symptoms that we mentioned, right? Very typical for this stage is also something called tunnel vision, where people do not see a way out. They think it's all bad because of them, or because of the reality, and they don't think in solutions, but only with problems. They cannot really help themselves. This is a moment where I believe someone from the outside, either a specialist, mental health specialist, or someone who's just wise and experienced in this kind of work, can give them an objective overview of the situation and tell them what's the corner they got themselves into.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is hope, because what we need to emphasize here is that burnout is a crisis. It's a chronic crisis that we've worked a lot for, but it's something that eventually passes. To make it happen, we need to think objectively about our resources, about our energy, about what we've already invested, how much can we go on like that. And with this kind of reflection, it's very important to give yourselves a break, to take proper rest, to reduce the stress and tension. And if you do so, you can expect a Phoenix phenomenon, which is basically a revival after a crisis. And this revival is a state where you regain your energy back, both mental and physical. And also what you gain is a new outlook on things. You can perceive the situation more objectively. You are basically wiser when it comes to your limits, your capabilities, and your values in this kind of engagement. And if you get back to volunteering, you can do it better. You can do it in a more healthy way. Burnout vicious circle can be broken at any stage as long as you can reflect on yourself and reach for help when necessary. Paulina, what I'm also curious about is whether volunteers that come for help report any psychosomatic symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so the most common problem what they talk about is sleep disorder.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about problem with falling asleep, and they have very often interrupted sleep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's very common when it comes to chronic stress. Basically, my clients who I treat from professional burnout
Mm-hmm.
have the same. Sleep disorder is the very first symptom, I would say. But also there are other side effects of burnout that I think it's worth mentioning now to give our viewers this feeling how far can it be spread out on our health and various aspects of our health. And so sleep disorder is one thing. Then there is appetite disorder. So people either overeat or cannot really eat because they're too stressed. And with food they try to solve their emotional tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then very often it happens that the stress hits the weakest organs or weakest
Mm-hmm.
systems in our body. So people who have tendency of falling with diseases related to cardiovascular system can have some heartaches or some arrhythmia or even a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
Then some neurological issues also can be observed. Basically, when we are in chronic stress, our whole nervous system is very tensed, so
Mm-hmm.
muscles get a lot of impulses that there is danger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our body is very tensed, and even if we do some basic sport, we can easily get injured because our body is not relaxed. So this is also what can happen. Then there are side effects related to libido,
Mm-hmm.
to hormonal system. There could be some hormonal disorder as well. People go to doctors looking for disease that is basically not there,
Mm-hmm.
or is just a side effect of chronic stress. So what we would like to emphasize, talking about those side effects, is that when we do not reduce stress properly, and when we walk around with uncured burnout, our whole health is at stake. Okay, so we've explored the subject of burnout. You already know what causes that, what are the symptoms, both individual and organizational. So now let's discuss how to react when it happens and how to prevent it from happening. What do you usually advise to your patients?
Yes, so this is very important to every volunteers to pay attention of these symptoms, to observe if something happens worse with them, with their health, for example. And this is crucial to be aware that this is symptoms means like something is wrong with me, for example. And very important also is be aware from signals in outside, for example from family, when where someone realize that something is changed for behavior in volunteers, and talk about this. So this is good to gain this and think about that. Maybe something is wrong really, and very often this is crucial to recognize causes to this burnout. Be aware of why I feel like that. Because if we can realize reason why we feel like that and why we feel burnout, we can take action to fix it.
So basically you recommend self-reflection and also reading some messages from our surroundings that our behavior changed, that we are not ourselves, and probably we should think about the reasons for it.
Yes.
Okay, so if we have this realization already, what to do next? What are the very basic ways, techniques for people to recover from burnout?
So the basic is to take a rest, to relax, to do something which relax themselves. Everyone have some activities which is very pleasure for them, and when we feel relaxed, when we feel better, good. So we should take action and do these activities. When we feel very overloaded, maybe we should have more time off. Maybe we should go on the forest, for example, or somewhere when we have distance for this situation for volunteers, and we take a breath. So yes, this is the first what we should do, and the second, we should take care of themselves also in way in sleep. We should sleep well, have enough hours to sleep, and we should take care that this sleep should be good quality, not interrupted. So this is very important. Sleep is very important to gain strength and energy. The next, what is very crucial is food, meals. We should remember about meals. We should remember about to eat food which is very nourished for themselves. Very good, of course. Food also should be pleasant for us, but also they have include a lot of very nourish ingredients to our body, have a good influence for our body. So food is good food, healthy food is very important also. And what is more, when we think about when I think about stress, stress is something with volunteers have problem very often. This is good to relax, and for example, if what we do to be more relaxed is not enough, this is good to try some relaxation techniques, for example, or breathing techniques, because this is very helpful. And very often this work for people.
So you're talking about very basic mental and physical hygiene when it comes to stress reduction. And this is actually these are the same tips that I give to my burnout clients. First of all, you mentioned about taking a break, about having rest and relax. Obviously, it's probably not easy to relax when you get involved in this kind of help, when you're aware that there is war going on, that there are people in need. But on the other hand, let's be clear about it. You are your only resource in this kind of activity, so you have to sharpen your axe, by taking a break, and you deserve this relax, especially if you engage a lot in helping other people. Then you mentioned sleep. Good quality sleep is very important, and when people are in chronic stress and burnout, usually it's very difficult to fall asleep properly. Even if you spend the night sleeping, very often you wake up being tired. And this is why it happens, because our brain is in a state of danger, and it does not fall asleep deeply, but it only snoozes. So it's always alerted, right?
Yes.
That's why the rest should be regular, so that we can bring back the sleep hygiene and help our brain relax again, right? Then you mentioned also going out to the nature, basically doing any kind of sports and recreation activities that also reduce stress. And what I also believe is very important is to reach out for emotional support of our natural environment, like friends, family, people who understand us, who can support us, who are kind to us, who do not judge, who basically can listen to us and be there for us when we are under a lot of stress. So to summarize, the basic hygiene when it comes to burnout is good quality sleep, recreation, relaxation, meditation, or whatever you please when it comes to relaxing your body and mind, and also reaching out to natural support. Okay, so we know what to do on individual level to overcome burnout, but what to do if those basic practices are not enough? What if the person still feels exhausted, helpless, cannot recover?
Yes, so this is a good time to come to a specialist, like a psychologist, psychotherapist, especially when we have a problem with it comes from our beliefs, for example. So this is work with our beliefs to change them, to change them to be more adaptive to our life. And this is important to recognize beliefs which are maladaptive, and we can work from with specialists, because this is hard to do this by own, and yes, we suggest to come and meet with specialists and talk with specialists about them.
I think that's a really good hint, especially that, as we mentioned before, when you're burned out, you have this tunnel vision and you see no way out, you have no outer perspective on your problem. That's why someone from the outside and a professional can help you see where your problems come from and how can you deal with them. As you said, how to have more adaptive beliefs about your engagement, right? Also, what I observe with my clients is that some people have this pattern to burnout. They do it frequently in every new job. And very often I have clients who tell me that, okay, this is the third time it happened to me, so I decided to do something about it. That's why it's also something to observe, I believe, with a specialist. Yeah. Okay, so where to seek this professional help? In many regions of Poland now, in the face of this military crisis in Ukraine, there are psychologists and mental health professionals who provide support for volunteers and for survivors, and very often it's free of charge. So you can definitely reach out for an organization that provides this kind of help. If you don't know where to turn to, you can always contact a crisis intervention center in your city, in your town, where they can direct you to a proper organization or foundation. From what we know in Krakow, where we are based, the Zustrich Foundation and Mental Health Helpline provide this kind of help for volunteers, and you are very welcome to contact us and to discuss the crisis that you experience in this very important job. What is crucial, I believe, is that you should not be alone, you should not be on your own, and you should not neglect it, because as you've heard, there might be various very serious side effects that affect your physiology, your health, and also your ability and willingness to help other people, which is now very crucial. So make sure to take care of yourselves, and let's stay in touch. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.